Okay, let's try another sentence. We're just reviewing what we've learned already through the first 8 or 9 weeks of the semester, what we know about parts of the sentence and how to identify them, so that we can use this skill as a way to figure out whether groups of words are correctly written sentences or not, on which we're tested on the GED or the HiSET. So here's another sentence. Under the trees, the boy handed his classmates the cookies and milk. So let's find the subject first. Who or what is doing something in this sentence? It's the boy, right? The boy. And what did the boy do? He handed. So there's a subject and a predicate. Now remember, there's always going to be a subject and a predicate. There might be, sometimes is, sometimes not, a direct object. So if there's a direct object, we'll find it by doing this. Say the subject, say the predicate, and ask what? Boy handed what? Boy handed, not his classmates, he didn't pick them up and hand them, right? But he handed the cookies and milk. That's what he handed his classmates. Now remember, we have to ask ourselves 2 questions to make sure that that's the direct object. First of all, are those nouns or pronouns? Yes, cookies and milk are things, so those are nouns. Do they rename or restate the subject? Are the cookies and milk the boy? Is the boy the cookies and milk? No, they're different things. So that's okay. We found that this is a direct object, and in this case, it's a compound direct object, isn't it? It has 2 parts to it. So compound direct object has 2 parts to it. All right, if there's a direct object, there might also be an indirect object. Remember, we'll find that by saying the subject, saying the predicate, saying the direct object, and asking to whom or for whom. So boy handed cookies and milk to whom? To his classmates, right? So we want to make sure, though, before we absolutely know that that's the indirect object, we have to make sure it's in the right place in the sentence. It has to be between the predicate and the direct object, and it is. Predicate comes before classmates, cookies and milk comes after classmates. So it's in the right place to be the indirect object, so that is actually the indirect object. And then our last step is to look for any prepositional phrases to see if there are any objects of the preposition. And we find that we have this prepositional phrase here. So the noun at the end of that prepositional phrase is the object of the preposition. Trees is the object of the preposition under. Okay? All right. So we found all the parts of the sentence. We just went through our usual steps. Let's try another one here. Let's try number 6. The leaves on the tree were red and yellow in the autumn sunlight. The leaves on the tree were red and yellow in the autumn sunlight. Okay, so let's figure out what the different parts of this sentence are. So, who or what is doing something? Now, this is a little weird because there's not actually an action in this sentence. It's a state of being verb, right? But what is it that were? It was the leaves. The leaves were. So there's the subject and predicate. Now, if we're looking for a direct object, remember we say the subject, we say the predicate, and we ask what. So the leaves were what? They were red and yellow. Now, if that's the direct object, it has to pass 2 tests. The first one is, are those nouns? No, red and yellow are adjectives, right? They're describing words. The leaves were red, the leaves were yellow. The red leaves, the yellow leaves. So this failed the first test to figure out whether it's a direct object. Now, this allows us to introduce our new term, which is predicate adjective. Now, that's just a fancy name for an adjective that comes in that place where a direct object would normally come, right? So instead of this being a direct object, a compound direct object, it's not. It's a predicate adjective. You do not have to remember that term. You're never going to see that on a GED or a HiSET, but we do need to know that that's a possibility. So this thing that answers the question what, leaves were what, that could be a direct object, or it could be a predicate adjective. Could be one more thing that we're going to see in a moment. So that's why when we find something that we think is a direct object, we have to ask, is that word a noun or pronoun? And does it rename or restate the subject? If it passes both those tests, then it is a direct object. If it's not a noun, if it's an adjective instead, then it's a predicate adjective, not a direct object. All right? So this is a compound because it has two parts, predicate adjective. We'll just put PA there for a moment, okay? All right, and then our last step, if there's no direct object, there will not be an indirect object. We don't even have to look, all right? There's only going to be an indirect object if there's a direct object. So the last thing we want to do is look for any prepositional phrases. So we have on the trees and in the autumn sunlight. So this noun at the end here of that prepositional phrase is an object of the preposition. This noun at the end here of this prepositional phrase is the object of the preposition. Okay, so we found all the parts of the sentence. All right, so let's go back. Let's try one more that will illustrate the third thing that an object might be, that what looks like a direct object might be. Let's say the two boys were the ringleaders of the bunch of kids. The two boys were the leaders of the and gave them orders. Okay, actually, I'm going to just end the sentence right here just to make this faster and easier. Okay. So the two boys were the leaders of the bunch of kids. So who or what is doing something? Again, this is a state of being verb. So who were the boys? Were. So that's the subject and the predicate. Now if we look for a direct object, we say the boys were what? The leaders, right? Now we have to, before we know that that's a direct object, we have to do our test. Is it a noun? Yes, leaders are people, so that's a noun. Does it rename or restate the subject? Are the leaders the boys? Are the boys the leaders? Yes, they're the same thing. The boys are the leaders. The leaders are the boys. So this is not a direct object. It's what's called a predicate nominative. Now, again, you will never need to remember that term for the GED or the HiSET. All I want you to remember is that what looks like a direct object in a sentence might not be a direct object if it's not a noun or a pronoun. If it's an adjective, it might be a predicate adjective. And if it's a noun, but it renames or restates the subject, then it's a predicate nominative. So if there's no direct object, so this is a predicate nominative, PN. If there's no direct object, there's no indirect object, so all we have to do is look for prepositional phrases. So of the bunch, the noun at the end of that prepositional phrase is the object of the preposition. The noun at the end of this prepositional phrase is the object of a preposition. So you can try the other exercises on here and see what you can come up with. If you have questions, you can bring them up during our online class meeting, or you can email me or find me in chat. Okay? All right, thanks.